Biggie Smalls was killed, Suge Knight was in the county jail. So in order for him to communicate with somebody on the street, he had to go through an intermediary, which was this female who was visiting him in jail, and tell him that this is what I want done. So there's a series of meetings. She goes and meets with Poochie. They agree on an amount. Suge makes the arrangement for that money to get transferred. She pays Poochie, and he goes and sets himself up at the Peterson Auto Museum and shoots and kills Biggie.
March 8, 1997, Los Angeles, California. It was a Saturday night, and the city's pulse was palpable. The vibrant nightlife, the shimmering lights of the clubs, and the air of excitement surrounding the Soul Train Music Awards after party at the Peterson Automotive Museum added an electric energy to the evening. Inside, celebrities mingled, with some of the biggest names in the music industry celebrating the night's triumphs. At the heart of it all was Christopher Wallace, better known as Biggie Smalls, the 24-year-old rap phenomenon from Brooklyn, New York. Biggie had just finished his performance at the awards show, and as the clock ticked past midnight, his entourage made their way to the exit. It had been an unforgettable night for the young rapper. His status as the reigning king of East Coast hip-hop was unquestionable. Biggie was at the top of his game, a superstar with platinum records, a high-profile record deal with Puff Daddy's Bad Boy Records, and a rapidly growing influence in both the music industry and pop culture. But as Biggie stepped into his black Chevrolet Suburban, the carefree mood would be short-lived. The vehicle, escorted by security, was meant to take him back to his hotel, the plush Sheraton Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. His bodyguard, Michael Big Mike Keith, was behind the wheel, with other members of Biggie's entourage in tow. Biggie himself sat in the back, chatting and laughing with friends. Unbeknownst to them, the dangers that lay ahead had already begun to unfold. As the Suburban made its way through the bustling L.A. streets, a dark-colored Chevrolet Impala suddenly pulled up alongside it at a red light near the intersection of Wilshire Boulevard and South Fairfax Avenue. The window of the Impala rolled down, and in a split second, 4 gunshots rang out. The bullets found their mark. Biggie Smalls was struck twice in the chest, once in the shoulder, and once in the thigh. The shooter, his identity concealed, sped off into the darkness, vanishing into the maze of Los Angeles streets. The attack was fast, efficient, and ruthless, like something out of a mobster movie. In the aftermath, chaos erupted. Biggie was rushed to the hospital, but it was clear that the wounds were fatal. At 1:15 a.m., he was pronounced dead at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. The music world had just lost one of its most talented and influential voices. Biggie Smalls' death sent shockwaves through the music industry. The murder was a tragic end to a life and career that had been only beginning to reach its full potential. But the implications of his murder were even deeper. Biggie's death was the latest chapter in the escalating East Coast-West Coast rap rivalry, which had already claimed the life of his close friend and fellow artist, Tupac Shakur, just 6 months earlier in Las Vegas. Biggie and Tupac had once been allies, but their relationship had soured as the media perpetuated a bitter feud between the two coasts. The East Coast-West Coast conflict had been fueled by a variety of factors: musical rivalry, record label wars, and personal animosities. But at its core, it had become something much darker. The death of Tupac Shakur in September 1996 had set off a firestorm of speculation and conspiracy theories. Some believed that Tupac's murder was connected to Suge Knight, the head of Death Row Records, and his associates. As a result, many wondered if Biggie's death was a retaliation for Tupac's killing, part of a cycle of revenge and violence that seemed to have no end. From the moment Biggie was shot, conspiracy theories began to emerge. Could Suge Knight have been involved? Was it a retaliation from the West Coast? Or was it something closer to home, a targeted attack from within the hip-hop industry itself? Los Angeles police were quickly on the scene, but the case would prove to be anything but straightforward. The investigation was complicated by the silence of the hip-hop community, which had its own code of loyalty, and by the racial and cultural tensions that hung over the investigation. No one from Biggie's inner circle or the West Coast hip-hop scene was willing to step forward to provide information. Witnesses who may have seen the shooter, the vehicle, or any other significant detail were either unwilling to cooperate or remained conveniently vague. The LAPD's first lead came through a report that the shooter may have been affiliated with the notorious Crips gang, one of Los Angeles's most violent and influential street gangs. A witness had claimed to see a man matching the description of the shooter outside the crime scene, a member of the Crips. This theory, though, was quickly ruled out. Investigators found no direct connection between Biggie's murder and gang activity, despite the presence of gangs in the area. Still, the idea of a gang involvement persisted. The LAPD had been dealing with gang violence for decades, and many officers were familiar with the turf wars, drug trade, and organized crime that plagued the city. But as the investigation continued, it became clear that this wasn't a typical gang-related killing. The level of precision in the shooting, the lack of a clear motive tied to gang activity, and the fact that Biggie had been a target of such a high-profile assassination made this case unique, and it didn't fit into the mold of a typical gang shooting. As the investigation moved forward, many eyes turned toward the music industry itself. Theories emerged that Biggie's murder might have been orchestrated as part of the ongoing East Coast-West Coast rivalry. Could the violence between Bad Boy Records, Biggie's label, and Death Row Records, which Tupac had been signed to, have escalated to this point? Puffy Combs, known as Puff Daddy, was the founder of Bad Boy Records and one of Biggie's closest associates. Some speculated that he might have been involved in orchestrating Biggie's murder, either out of rivalry with Suge Knight or as part of a larger scheme to gain control over the West Coast rap scene. However, there was no solid evidence to link Puff Daddy to the murder, and the theory ultimately fell apart. The LAPD then turned its attention to another potential lead, a former LAPD officer named David Mack. Mack had ties to the criminal underworld, including associations with gang members. It was reported that Mack was present at a party the night of the shooting and that he had been in the vicinity of the murder scene. He was later convicted of a bank robbery in 1997 and sentenced to prison, but the investigation into his potential involvement in Biggie's murder remained inconclusive. Despite circumstantial evidence, there was never enough to charge Mack with the crime. With few solid leads, the case soon entered the realm of conspiracy. Some speculated that the LAPD itself might have been involved in Biggie's murder, citing the department's alleged ties to gang members and organized crime. A number of theories circulated, suggesting that the shooting had been orchestrated by corrupt officers. This idea gained traction in part due to the involvement of David Mack, whose criminal activities cast suspicion on the integrity of the LAPD at the time. Another theory was that the murder was a contract killing and assassination arranged by an unknown party with the goal of silencing Biggie once and for all. Some speculated that the hit had been planned by Death Row Records as retribution for Tupac's death. This theory was fueled by the bitter rivalry between the labels, the violent tension that existed between Suge Knight and Bad Boy Records, and the fact that Suge had been known to resort to violence in order to maintain control over his artists and the industry. There were even whispers that the killing might have been ordered by someone from inside Biggie's own camp, a betrayal from within. A man named Amir Muhammad, a former security guard for Death Row Records, was another person of interest in the case. Muhammad's name surfaced when an informant came forward claiming that he had seen Muhammad near the scene of Biggie's murder. Some believed that Muhammad had been the one to pull the trigger. However, just like with the other suspects, there was no conclusive evidence to support the theory. The investigation was filled with dead ends, and the pieces never seemed to fit together. The LAPD's frustration grew. As years passed, the case went cold. Theories continued to swirl, but the true identity of Biggie's killer remained a mystery. Years passed, and the investigation into Biggie Smalls' death seemed to hit a wall. But in 2006, A new investigation was launched when Detective Greg Kading was assigned to a special task force that revisited the unsolved murders of both Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls. The task force aimed to take a fresh look at the case files, examine new leads, and bring closure to both families and to the world of hip-hop that had been so deeply affected by their deaths. Detective Kading and his team scoured through new evidence, including tapes and interviews with former gang members and insiders. Kading's team was able to uncover new details, suggesting that Biggie's murder had indeed been planned as part of a larger conspiracy. According to a key informant who was associated with both the Crips and the entertainment industry, the hit was carried out as a contract killing paid for by someone in the music business. The informant implicated both gang members and industry insiders,